Hello and welcome, dear students. Hello and welcome to this video lecture series on behalf of CLAT SATHEE. I am Dr. Animesh, and today we are going to discuss offences against marriage and defamation. That means offences against marriage and reputation. That we'll discuss. Till now, we have been discussing offences against property in the previous lectures, and today we are going to discuss offences against marriage. Now, moving on. The first offense against marriage that we have to discuss today is obviously fake marriage. Fake marriages or what we say mock marriage. Now, what constitutes a fake or mock marriage? First of all, see, I'll give you a brief idea about what marriage means. Now, marriage as a concept means it's a union between a male and a female, biological male and a biological female. Till now in India, we do not have acceptance of any same-sex marriages, but we are only talking about marriage between a biological male and marriage between a biological female. There are exceptions to transgenders. Yes, a male can marry a transgender woman or a female can marry a transgender man, but nonetheless, they should be biological male or biological female. And we do not allow homosexual couples to get married as of now. Means their marriage is not recognized by law. The ceremony can be performed by anyone, but their ceremony is not, there is no legal sanction to it. So we are talking about marriage. Now, purpose of marriage is essentially, if you are a student of sociology, you'll say companionship, everything. But in law, particularly in matrimonial laws, marriage simply has one objective. Marriage is a union between a biological male and a biological female for the purpose of legitimacy of children. Legitimacy of children, something that goes to the core of marriage. A marriage is not marriage. The point of marriage is having legitimate, because children you can have without marriage, but those children will be illegitimate. That is the problem. So for the purpose of legitimacy, there has to be the institution of marriage survives. Rest everything, companionship, everything a person can have without marriage in a live-in relationship as well. The difference between a live-in relationship and marriage is essentially that the children are not legitimate, considered legitimate in a relationship other than marriage, but the children are considered legitimate in marriage. So moving on, a fake or a mock marriage. First offense is that entering into a fake marriage ceremony with fraudulent intent. See, if a person performs a fake marriage, now when I say fake marriage, it means in order to get married, there are some rituals or some ceremonies that have to be performed. There is a particular way in a marriage has to be done. We call it solemnization of marriage. How marriage is solemnized or celebrated is a very important aspect. Now, to tell you, marriage in India is basically governed by the personal laws. Personal laws means it is different for Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Parsis, Jews, or there is something what we call special marriage or secular marriage. In all these kinds of marriage, how marriage is performed is different. Like a Hindu marriage requires ceremonies to be performed. The ceremonies can be shastric or customary ceremonies, which generally includes what we say ceremonies like Kanyadan, ceremonies like Agni Parinay, ceremony like Pani Grahan, Saptapadi, which is very essential ceremony, taking 7 steps in northeast direction, and 7 signifying 7 vows of the marriage. So if somebody performs a fake marriage in the sense that actually marriage is not happening, like it happens in TV shows and dramas, marriages are performed, but those marriages are not actual ceremonies because the person who is performing that marriage is not an actual priest, they're actors. The actors, they're not chanting real mantras and everything. So if it is a fake marriage ceremony and it is entered with a fraudulent intent, any person enters into a fake marriage ceremony with an intent to defraud the other party or to anyone else, commits this offense. Means if I enter into a ceremony with a particular woman, knowing that this is not a real marriage that is happening, she is not aware about what ceremonies are required to perform. So I what we performed is Satyanarayana Puja, and I communicated to her that this was marriage ceremony. Now, obviously, my intent is to defraud. Then it constitutes a serious offense. If a person performs a fake marriage ceremony, not an actual marriage ceremony, a marriage ceremony which does not knowingly, I do believe that this marriage ceremony will not suffice the burden of uh, proof. Means this marriage will have no effect, but I still go through that marriage, which in order to deceive someone. In that case, it will be considered an offense, because marriage is not something that has to be taken lightly. Marriage is it's serious business. It's a very serious matter. So if a person enters into a fake marriage ceremony with fraudulent intent, they intend to defraud parents or defraud society. In all those cases, they'll be considered as an offender and will be crime for a man or a woman. Now, another offense is the point two is a deceitful cohabitation. In this case, simply if a man causes a woman to cohabit or have sexual relationship with him with a false, a deceitful inducement that I am your husband. Now we discussed this is in rape as well. This is a similar offense which says that a particular man induces a particular woman that we have married, but actually they didn't get married, because this might be because of the fake marriage ceremony that has been performed, or if somebody is impersonating her husband. If a particular woman is not aware who her husband is, obviously we are talking about, it's an old law in which it was possible that the woman was not aware who my husband is till after the marriage. So the couples didn't used to know each other very well before the marriage, and they used to know each other after the marriage. So if a person says to a woman that, hey, I am your husband, with me you got married. Now, if that person, by this deceitful inducement, making a false, and we discussed the meaning of deceit, making a false statement, knowing it to be false. You know that you are not the husband of this woman, and you make an inducement that we have had marriage. Now, that marriage is a fake marriage, mock marriage, in front of a fake registrar, let's say. I asked my friend to become a fake marriage registrar, and he issued me as a fake marriage certificate. Now, the woman believes that I am her husband, lawfully married husband, and suppose she cohabits or have sexual relationship with me, that will constitute an offense. That will constitute an offense of deceitful cohabitation, offense against marriage. You cannot sexually exploit a woman by portraying yourself to be her lawfully wedded husband, or by insinuating the fact that you and she they got marriage in a valid ceremony, and then you cohabit with her, then this constitutes a crime. I'll give you another example. Suppose person there is a person who commits some kind of deceit as to his identity. Suppose he's a Hindu and he says that he's a Muslim, and marries a girl under a Muslim ceremony, hijab, kubul, and all. Now that marriage didn't actually happen, because for Muslim law, both the parties must be Muslim. At least the man should be a Muslim. So the marriage ceremony actually have no consequence. Why it has no consequence? Because obviously the guy was not a Muslim. In that case, what the boy has done, he has committed an offense under this section. Similarly, if a boy who is not a Hindu, he portrays himself to be a Hindu, there is an identity fraud, commits identity fraud, and gets married with a girl in Hindu ceremony. Whether the marriage happened, and answer is no, because the primary ingredient of a Hindu marriage is both the parties must be Hindu. If both the parties are Hindus, then if he got married under a Hindu ceremony while not being a Hindu, then he deceitful inducement. Now this boy knows that no marriage has taken place, because no marriage could have taken place. But obvious that he is not a Hindu. So even if he performs Hindu marriage 10 times, no marriage has taken place. But the girl believes that a marriage has taken place. Now he causes that woman to cohabit or have sexual relationship with him. Now that constitutes a fake or a mock marriage, that constitutes a deceitful cohabitation. Might also constitute rape, but might not constitute rape, but nonetheless will definitely constitute a offense under offenses against marriage that is there in the BNS. So if you cohabit with a woman who is not your wife, but you have made a deceitful, you have defrauded her, you have made a false statement knowing it to be false that you are the husband of that woman, and that woman trusts you and cohabits with you or have sexual relationship with you, then it's a serious offense. Somebody portrays himself to be the husband of a particular woman and then sexually exploits her. Heinous crime. High punishment. 7 years, 10 years punishment is there. Next, bigamy. Bigamy is a very serious offense. Now I'll tell you. Bigamy requires three primary ingredients. First, a person can be prosecuted for bigamy. Number one, if they have a lawful spouse. Means I already have a valid marriage. Means I am already married under some law. My marriage has legal consequence. It might be a Hindu marriage, Muslim marriage, Christian marriage, secular marriage, whatever. But if I should have a lawful spouse, if I don't have a lawful spouse, or I do not have a marriage which has legal consequence, then I cannot be prosecuted for bigamy. Suppose I am in a live-in relationship with some woman, and then I go and I marry someone. Now that would constitute bigamy? Answer is no. Because I didn't have a spouse, I had a live-in partner. Here we're not talking about live-in partner, we are talking about spouse. Bigamy only refers to anybody having a lawful spouse, husband or wife. Then he marries again. Now, marries again means he performs the ceremony of marriage. A ceremony of marriage can be in the form of, if it's a Hindu wedding, it can be a Muslim wedding, Christian wedding, whatever. If while having a lawful spouse, he or she marries again, and by the virtue of the personal laws of that person, such second marriage is void or unlawful. Like in Hindu law, the essential or the primary rule of marriages require that neither parties should have a living spouse. Same goes in Christian law, same goes in Parsi law, same goes under secular law. Neither party should have a living spouse in a marriage. Except in the case of a Muslim male who can marry up to 4 women at the same time. It is not permissible for anyone, any man or woman, even Muslim women are not allowed to marry again. There is no polyandry. And there is no polyandry allowed in Islam as well. Only polygamy is allowed. Up to 4 women a Muslim man can marry simultaneously. So even if a Muslim woman has already a wife, he marries again. His or her second marriage is not void. His second marriage will be considered intact. And the first marriage, if he marries a third woman, third marriage is also valid. But bigamy punishes in the cases when the second marriage is void because of the reason of this prohibition. Like a Hindu man has a wife, now he marries another woman. Now that is a void marriage because Hindu law prohibits that you cannot get married if you have a living spouse. So if you have a spouse, then you cannot get married again. If you get married again, that constitutes bigamy. That constitutes an offense. That constitutes a very serious offense. 7 years imprisonment is there. So there are 3 requirements. First, having a lawful spouse. Then you marry again. Now that second marriage, obviously, even if it is void, but if the ceremonies are performed, अगर फेरे ले लिए किसी के साथ, so that will constitute the offense of bigamy. But having affair with another woman or another man is not bigamy. Means suppose a person has a lawful spouse and they have affair with someone. Now they have not constituted bigamy. Because bigamy requires again they perform the ceremonies of marriage. If the ceremonies of marriage is performed again while in the lifetime of the first spouse, that will constitute an offense. Invariably, that becomes a huge problem. Now, in bigamy, in respect of some things you have to understand. First is a very interesting case of what we call Sarla Mudgal versus Union of India. It's a very legendary case. I generally don't mention cases for CLAT students, but this is a very interesting case in which there is a Hindu man, husband of Sarla Mudgal. He converted himself to Islam just for the sake of getting married again. In Hindu law, if you are a Hindu, you can only have one wife, but if you become a Muslim, then you can have four. So those people who suppose have an affair and they want to perform second marriage, obviously you cannot, because without dissolving the first marriage can be dissolved by the death or divorce. There are only two ways to dissolve a marriage, either death or divorce. Killing your spouse is a tricky aspect, but obviously lot can happen. We recently saw, when I'm making this video, there is a case in Meerut in which there is a guy, I believe his name is Saurabh, and is killed by his wife and wife's lover. Because obviously, till the husband is alive, you cannot get married again. Until your wife is allowed, you cannot get married again. So, death or dissolution, divorce, and obviously, divorce in Hindu law cannot, you cannot unilaterally divorce your spouse like in Muslim. A Muslim man can very well say divorce and the wife will be divorced, and wife has no say in it. But in Hindu law, if you want to divorce your wife or your husband, you'll have to go to court. And court, in court, you'll have to prove that what is your spouse's fault because of which you are giving divorce. So, you cannot prove fault, you will not get divorce. Getting divorce is very difficult. So, laws of bigamy state that if a person, for the sake of getting married again, converts himself, he says that now I have become Muslim, I can marry four women. He is not allowed to do that. In Sarla Mudgal's case, her husband married another woman after converting himself to Islam. He tried to get married again. Now the court said, you see, what you are doing, you are making mockery of marriage, you are making mockery of religion. And that is something which is not allowed. That's not allowed completely. You cannot, under no circumstances, you can convert yourself and get married, or your conversion for the sake of marriage, then that conversion is also invalid because you are making mockery of the religion, you are picking and choosing, and your marriage is also invalid because you are already married. You cannot, your conversion is invalid, and thus your second marriage will also be considered void and the person will be punished for bigamy. So the husband of Sarla Mudgal, who tried to play a very clever trick on law, was sent behind bars because he has committed bigamy. Because that conversion is unlawful and that marriage is also unlawful, which is done for an unlawful purpose. Just for the sake of getting married, you cannot convert yourself. So that is something which has been established by. But see, if somebody in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the bigamy says that if the party's first spouse, they have died, or a lawful divorce has been granted by any court, if any court divorce has been granted, or if the party is presumed dead. Presumed dead means if they have not been heard for 7 years by the parties who would have heard of them if they were alive. See, if I am alive, there are my associates, family members who are hearing from me. They will talk, they acknowledge my existence. But suppose I disappear for 7 years, in the sense that there is absolutely no way to reach me or to connect with me, and there's no way to know whether I'm alive or dead. So in those cases, 7 years a person is presumed to be dead. So if that person is presumed to be dead, then that person's lawful husband or wife can get married again, and that will not constitute bigamy. But that provision is simply if your spouse is missing for that many years, you can go to the court and get divorced. You'll not have to wait 7 years. Even after 2 years, 3 years, you can go to the court and say, sir, my spouse is missing, or he has deserted me, and I'm not sure whether he is alive or dead, but at least he has not made connection with me for significant period of time, so grant me divorce. That's a ground of divorce. But still, let's say the husband or spouse is missing and missing for 7 years, and you got married, and after that the spouse returns, still it will not be considered by him. It will not be considered by him because you waited for 7 years and the person was not heard by any person and was presumed dead. Then in that case, it will not constitute bigamy. It will not constitute bigamy because 7 years is a long time, and no one will come back after be dead unless you are a actor in a Ekta Kapoor serial. You are not Mihir. Some of you might not understand that reference. That reference is to a very popular TV series, Kyuki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu, which Smriti Irani ji on former member of parliament was the lead actress, and was a character Mihir who used to die and he used to reincarnate, die and reincarnate. That happened multiple times. So that never happens. That actually you got married and you waited for 7 years and you got married again. That's not bigamy. That's perfectly all right. That will not be considered a crime. Now another tricky aspect in the case of bigamy is that nobody else can file a. Suppose my friend is having two wives. He's a Hindu. I understand that he's a Hindu and he has two wives. So, in order to prosecute him, I cannot go to the court and say, sir, my spouse married two. No. Only the spouse can go to the court of law to complain of the bigamy. And spouse or her relatives can go to the court and say, sir, my husband has committed bigamy. But not a stranger. I cannot go to the court and challenge someone's marriage, even if they have committed bigamy. I cannot go and question that in court. So there is a requirement, there is some kind of locus standi requirement. Locus standi means you have a right to file a case. If you do not have right to file a case, you cannot, under no circumstances, you can file a case. Only the spouse can file a case that my husband or my wife has committed bigamy. No third party, not a stranger to that marriage can come and say, sir, this is bigamous marriage, you should stop. No? If the parties are fine with it, then all offences against marriage have this clause of privity, in the sense that only the party to the marriage can approach the court. Not a random third person cannot approach. Okay, this is about bigamy. Next is cruelty. Now, before we move on to cruelty, it's very simple. Cruelty, the idea of cruelty is very simple, that any husband or relative of the husband treats a married woman with cruelty. So cruelty here, cruelty means cruelty in respect of domestic relationship only, in the relationship of husband and wife only. If a married woman is subjected to cruelty by husband or any relative of the husband, like mother-in-law, father-in-law, any one of them, if she is treated with cruelty, in that case it constitutes a crime. But the primary question is, what constitutes cruelty? Very important to understand. So the definition of cruelty says that any act which drives a woman to commit suicide. First, if you have done such behavior which drives a woman to commit suicide or causes harm or injury to her body or mind in any way. If there is physical cruelty, then there is mental cruelty. Physical cruelty is very simple to understand. If you hit a woman, if you physically torture her, cause her injury, cause her harm, that constitutes physical cruelty. But there is also significant part of mental cruelty. If you have said such words which causes great pain or mental pain to that particular woman, that also constitutes cruelty. Means if it leads to, or it abets her to commit suicide. Suppose a mother-in-law says to a daughter-in-law that, okay, you can't cook, or you can't give me a male grandson, or you have not bought dowry. All these things are considered cruelty, because a cruel behavior, obviously domestic violence is a huge problem in Bharat. Obviously, many women are subjected to such cruelty. Now, obviously, the ratio has reduced, and this provision has been misused as well. But We recently saw a huge debate on a particular movie called Mrs. Mrs. A movie came, and there was a huge response to society about that. A woman was compelled to perform household work like some house help or something like that. I mean, she was alienated. Obviously, the women who work at the house are very dignified. It's not a menial or inferior job. Or those people who work at households, they also deserve all kind of respect. But she was not treated kindly by her husband and father-in-law and mother-in-law. So if a particular person, a married woman, is treated with cruelty in the sense that by words, if obviously physical cruelty is there, then so it's very simple. It can be understood very simply. But if by words, if you have caused mental pain, torture, trauma to a particular woman, which might or might not drive her to commit suicide, that constitutes cruelty. Point number one. Point number two, what constitutes cruelty is if you demand for dowry. Very simple. Demand for dowry. If a person makes a demand for dowry, if the in-laws makes for demand, any demand in respect of property, in respect of money, that constitutes cruelty. Anything, any demand made in reference to dowry constitutes cruelty. Unfortunately, married women face that trauma all the time. Demand for dowry and everything. So if a particular in a particular case, if a woman has been subjected to cruelty, either she has been subjected to mental or physical pain, or there has been a demand for dowry. In that case, this offense of cruelty will be established, and the husband or the person, any in-law, can be punished for 3 years. But there are some procedural safeguards. Until unless the preliminary inquiry is done, nobody can be arrested. Because see, this provision is, while very important and very rational, has been subjected to some kind of misuse. Because see, every domestic dispute does not constitute cruelty. Husband and wife, they fight all the time. They might have disagreement. And if in a disagreement, the wife says that, oh, he has committed cruelty against me, or she files a criminal case. Now that becomes a bit unfair or problematic, because if it's a domestic dispute, in the sense if there is a disagreement between husband and wife, even if they abhor each other, they don't like each other, the correct remedy is going to the matrimonial court, family court. You go to the family court, you resolve your dispute, or you get your divorce and go in a separate way. But many a times a civil dispute, a matrimonial disagreement is given a color of cruelty, and the husband or entire criminal case is lost. So every act every act is not considered cruelty. Every rude word that is said to the wife, obviously, if the couple fight, there are some intemperate words will always be said by the husband or the wife. Wife also says and various type of hurtful things. Husband also says some things which are hurtful. That is essentially a matrimonial dispute that should not be brought to criminal. So the criminal courts are very conscious. They have now become conscious after this Honorable Supreme Court highlighted this multiple times, that you should not take a case within the criminal law's domain. You should not entertain a case of cruelty unless and until the cruelty is significant and reoccurring. This is very important to understand. If the cruelty, if some hurtful word is said by husband to the wife, like I suppose a husband wife criticizes that, okay, your cooking is absurd, that can cause pain to the wife. But that is something it's not significant to bring it to the domain of criminal law, because that is not significant, neither it's reoccurring. So if it's significant and reoccurring, it's cruelty. But if it's not significant and absolutely not reoccurring, then to say it's cruelty, it's problematic. There's a movie called Thappad, and in which the primary idea was that husband slapped his wife once. Now, obviously, that's a cruel behavior. That's problematic, highly problematic. It should not have taken place, and that constitutes hurt and everything. But whether it comes in the definition of cruelty, You might argue, might not, because it's a reoccurring behavior. Cruelty is not an isolated incident, but it's a reoccurring behavior. So, what constitutes cruelty? But obviously, if the husband has done physical cruelty towards that wife, just like in that movie, that there is very less tolerance, as it should be. The courts are very less tolerant about physical cruelty. Mental cruelties, we have to understand. We have to take in the factor in the circumstance. Husband and wife, they fight, they say intemperate words, they say n number of words in anger which are hurtful, may cause mental pain to both the parties, but should not constitute cruelty in general. But if the torture is significant and reoccurring, that constitutes cruelty. So this is a law which has to be carefully understood. Then again, third party cannot go, only the spouse can go to only the wife, the married woman can go to the court for cruelty. Other people, they do not have any locus standi. But if you see any domestic violence happening at any place, you should interfere. Ghanti bajao. There is a whole ad campaign and a campaign Ghanti bajao. If you see domestic violence or cruelty happening towards any woman at any place, you should go and you should ring a bell. A person might say, how it is your business? No, it's everyone's business. Domestic violence is everyone's business, but it should be actually violent. Do not interfere in the husband and wife fighting. They fight all the time, but if there is a violence, you should interfere. Anyway, everyone should interfere. You go and you ring the bell, you disrupt them, you stop them from doing that. So that is something is a civic duty that we have. Okay, this is about offences against marriage. Let's move on to defamation. Now, defamation is obviously a civil wrong. In the taught lectures, you must have gone through this topic of defamation. But if you have not gone, I'll give you a basic idea. That if a person, if he makes a statement and he knows or he has reasons to believe that this statement will harm the reputation of another person, he makes an insinuation. Now, makes a statement means statement by any means, by written words, by if he speaks, if he writes, if he draws, if he makes a cartoon, if he makes a song, whatever. If a person makes a statement by visible representation, by words, anything, makes a silent movie. You see, silent movies are very, very impactful. Can give you n number of ideas. If you have seen some cartoons by the legendary greatest of all time, Charlie Chaplin ji, then you will understand that what constitutes, then how powerful silence is. So if a person makes a statement by words, by action, by visible representation, by music, and he knows or has reasons to believe that the statement will harm the reputation of the other person, it will go against the reputation of the other person, that will constitute defamation. Defamation requires that the statement shall harm the other person, and it actually harms some kind of damage must be there. But making a statement knowing that the statement will harm reputation of any other person constitutes defamation. Now, even if you have made that statement ironically or alternatively, you have not named someone, but you have referred to them, or you have made a satirical comment and a sarcasm, or that sarcasm can also constitute defamation. Defamation need not be direct or should be pinpointed towards the person by name. If you have referred to that person, if you have made a statement which any person would hear, will understand about whom this statement is made. Or if you have made a insinuation, a satirical comment. Satire is a form of criticism. It can be a flattery, criticism, or whatever. If you make a satire or an ironical difference, if you say कि अरे मुझको पता है, अरे वो तो बिल्कुल चोर नहीं है, तो बोले अच्छे आदमी है. So in that case, it means that you are making that statement ironically. So if you make an ironical statement, if you make a satire or what we call innuendo, in that case, it will be considered as defamation. First, another explanation to this term definition is that even dead persons can be defamed. If you make a statement about a dead person whose reputation is carried out by his families and relatives, and their defamation harms the interest of those people who are existing. Suppose there is a money corporation. So if I make a false statement about the Shri Dhirubhai Ambani ji, obviously that will affect the present chairman of the Reliance industry, Shri Mukesh Ambani. So if I make a false statement, if I make a defamatory statement about Shri Dhirubhai Ambani ji, even his relatives can file a case against me for defamation, because his reputation is carried on by his family, kids. Okay, that will constitute defamation. If I make a statement about Rajiv Gandhi ji, obviously his political legacy is carried out by Rahul Gandhi ji. He can come after me. Well, that constitutes defamation. Okay, and when a company can be defamed, it is not that defamation of a person is defamation, but a company can also be defamed. If I have said, like, this company has been involved in corruption, like people trying to slander in Indian industries, market leaders, they try to slander in order to just shake the stock market and harm Bharat. If you want to harm Bharat, you will have to harm the people money. So there is a particular fake organization called Hindenburg who, just in order to destabilize Indian stock market, made a so-called fake expose on the Adani Industries, so that Indian Adani industry will lose stock. And the Honorable Supreme Court said that it is rubbish. It was a hit job, financial hit job. People do that all the time. Whether that will constitute defamation, answer is yes. Even though you have not defamed a human person, but you have defamed an artificial person or a legal person, that is a company. So if you harm a legal person's reputation, a company can have reputation, obviously. Adani industry, the mine industry, Tata, everyone, they have their reputation. So if there is a hit job by some foreign agent, they just want to harm Bharat, so, and they want to destabilize Indian stock market, all kinds of rumors are spread by them. That constitutes defamation. Okay. Then there are certain exceptions to the term of defamation. What constitutes defamation? There are certain exceptions to this idea. And the first exception is obviously when you have made a comment about the functioning of a public servant. See, if you have made a statement about the public conduct of a public servant, that does not constitute defamation. This is very important to understand. Public conduct, in good faith, obviously. See, the news channels, the journalists, they make statements all the time. They accuse that, okay, मंत्री जी ने गड़बड़ कर दी, IAS अधिकारी ने गलती कर दी. If I say the prime minister is not working properly, the chief minister is incompetent, whatsoever, you can say all the time that my MLA has failed and he has not done act properly. All these statements we all the time people make about prime minister, people or politicians, even IAS officers and everyone. That does not constitute defamation, because you have made statement about the public conduct of the public servant. There's a public servant. Suppose a prime minister also, he says all the time that I'm a public servant, I'm a pradhan sevak. But actually a person who is sitting on that position is a public servant. Any person who is employed by the state, employed by the government for the public purpose is a public servant, and he has a public role. And that system of that particular aspect will not constitute defamation. Like suppose I'm a public servant, I teach at a university. If you make a statement that he's not teaching well, the question papers are not up to the standard, or he's not evaluating, that will not constitute defamation. That will not constitute. I cannot sue you for file a case for defamation, because I'm a public servant and teaching in the classroom. The evaluation I do, the grade I papers I frame, that is all public conduct. Attendance I give, and he's very strict in attendance. It's not defamation. But you cannot make such statement about my private life. Because you cannot say that he has a affair with someone, or he has a bitter relationship with his wife. No, these matters are not public matters. These are not public conduct. Official conduct nahi hai. So if a person makes a statement about public matter, public affairs of the public servant, that may constitute defamation. That may constitute that may constitute defamation. That can be considered defamation. So that has to be kept in. Secondly, something like you cannot. It is not defamation if you uh, report the judgment of the court or the parliament. Parliament or something is said, and you make a reporting of that. Parliamentarians say n number of nasty things about each other. You make a reporting of that. You have not committed defamation because you have reproduced what was said in the parliament or assembly or in court. Suppose a judge says something about someone. Suppose judge has convicted someone in an offense. Suppose a judge has convicted a person for murder. Now what I have reported, now this person A, is a murderer. Now whether that constitutes defamation, the answer is no. Because court said that he is a murderer. And what I have written is, I have reported what the court said. So if I report what has been stipulated by the court, that does not constitute defamation. वो फिर defamation नहीं. Similarly, Parliament ने क्या कहा court? Even if suppose lower court convicted him for murder and High Court acquitted him. So while he was convicted, I wrote him that he is a murderer. I will not be considered to defame him. I will not consider that I have defamed him. It will be considered okay, no problem. Okay. So if you are making a reporting of a court or a parliament or something, and you are making a statement about, criticize or talk about the conduct of a public servant, like everybody is making statements about the bundles of the cash that has been found at the house of an honorable judge of Delhi High Court. They make all types of statements, but that statement will not be considered defamation, because if somebody has that amount of money, that is obviously a matter related to prevention of corruption. So it is involved. It is related to the public conduct of a public servant. You can criticize. There's no problem. A public conduct of a public servant you can criticize, but one has to be temperate in the matters of judges. Because judges, there is something called contempt. It's very problematic. Contempt has been most. There has been instances of abuses of this provision as just trying to make judiciary beyond. No one should be beyond criticism in the constitution. Everyone should be same, should be equal in the court of public criticism. दुनिया सबकी बुराई करती है. श्री राम जी के वो उत्तरकांड में there is a fake story in Ramayana that some dhobi, a fisherman, made a false statement, a wrongful statement. So Shri Ram didn't punish that person because public opinion is something. Public criticism or having public opinion is very important, even if it was not a democracy, but still. This is very interesting. So defamation has certain exceptions. There are more exceptions as well, but those are not very relevant for you to at this juncture. Obviously, when you go to law school, you will learn everything. But we have discussed explanation and we have discussed exception. You got a basic idea about defamation. So this concludes our discussion on criminal substantive law. There are other parts, but they're not that relevant for you. We'll discuss some basics of criminal procedure in the upcoming classes. So thank you so much for being patient listeners. We'll discuss introduction to criminal procedure in the next class. Thank you so much for listening. Keep learning.